Let her sleep on the couch. Those 5 words cut through the hallway and straight through me. In the family rental I paid for, my son stood there while his wife sorted out the rooms like I was extra luggage. If you think that's the end of it, hold on. What happened after that sentence didn't just change my week, it changed my family. And when you hear the choice I made, you'll understand why you never underestimate a grandmother who has nothing left to lose. If you want to know how a 67-year-old woman turned a smug plan on its head, don't go anywhere. Because by the end of this story, you'll learn that the most powerful words on any contract aren't in the fine print, they're in the cancellation policy. Please don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who needs a bit of courage, and subscribe, so you never miss these real-life stories of women finding strength when life tests them. My name is Geraldine Hill. I'm 67, a widow. I worked 40 years as a bookkeeper at a small plumbing supply company in Ohio. I was good with numbers and careful with money. My husband, Ray, passed last winter. After the funeral, I told myself I wouldn't sit in that quiet house and let grief harden me. I wanted one good week with my son, Charles, his wife, Judith, and their 2 kids, Ben and Nora. A week to remember we're still a family. So I picked a coastal town in South Carolina. Not fancy, but beautiful, flat paths for my knees, a boardwalk, good seafood, and a rental house a short walk from the beach. For bedrooms, big porch, wide living room. I used my savings and my credit card. I told Charles, I've got this. It's my treat. He said, Mom, that's generous. Judith said, we'll bring the snacks. That should have told me everything. We arrived near dusk. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen. The kids ran down the hall counting doors. I set the grocery bags on the kitchen island. The house was exactly like the photos. Clean, bright, simple. I felt proud. I wanted them to feel cared for. I wanted to hear laughter around a table that I had paid for. Judith took charge right away. Okay, the master is for us, she said, pointing. Ben and Nora get the bunks down the hall. Charles, can you put our suitcases by the king bed? She didn't look at me. She was already opening drawers like the place was hers. Charles hovered between us. Mom, you good? I'm fine, I said, because that's what mothers say. Judith walked into the last bedroom, made a face at the twin beds, and shut the door. Those twins are too small, she said, and the mattress is lumpy. We'll take the master. I waited for someone to ask where I'd sleep. No one did. The kids ran back to the kitchen asking for cookies. Charles carried a cooler to the porch. I opened the fridge and started putting things away: milk, eggs, fruit cups, the little bottle of hot sauce I like. Judith pulled out a bottle of white wine and set it on the counter like a trophy. Then she said it. Let her sleep on the couch. She said it the way you'd talk about storing an umbrella. Not cruel, just careless. That was worse. Charles didn't argue. He looked over his shoulder and said, Mom, is that okay for tonight? We're all tired. For tonight, I said. I folded the plastic grocery bags. Steady hands, steady voice. Inside, something caved in. We ate takeout. Everyone talked about the beach and the pier and a taco place someone saw on the drive-in. I nodded at the right moments. Nora threaded her small hand through my elbow and said she wanted to collect shells with me, which gave me a little air. Judith scrolled on her phone between bites. Charles told me work had been crazy, a word that means don't ask questions. After dinner, the kids brushed their teeth and bounced into their bunks. Judith shut the master door like a line had been drawn. Charles brought me a spare sheet and a pillow. We'll figure out the rooms tomorrow, he said. I'm sure you will, I said. The couch was long but low. The ceiling fan hummed. The air conditioning was set colder than I like. I lay down and stared at the ceiling and listened to water move in the pipes. I thought about the day I taught Charles to ride a bike behind the elementary school, running in a straight skirt and sensible shoes, afraid he'd fall. I thought about Ray's last night in the hospital when I squeezed his hand and told him I'd watch over our boy. I thought about all the times I said yes, even when money was tight, and I wanted to say no. Judith laughed from behind the master door, a bright, sharp sound. Charles answered in a low voice. I looked at my purse under the coffee table. Wallet, keys, phone, the printed rental email folded in thirds. I had printed it out like it was 1998, out of habit. The subject line still made me smile. Reservation confirmed. I pulled the sheet over my shoulders and tried to be practical. It's only one night. Tomorrow we'll switch. Tomorrow they'll think about how this looks. Tomorrow he'll remember who packed school lunches for 12 years. That's what I told myself. But I'm 67. I know tomorrow is just today in a different shirt. Around midnight, I got up for a glass of water. The house felt strange, the kind of quiet that is not peace but distance. In the kitchen, the under-cabinet light was on. Someone had left papers on the counter, pages from the rental agreement. I didn't touch them. I stood with my hand on the edge of the sink and read the bold headings. Check in, check out, occupancy, payment method, refund policy. I yawned and put the glass in the dishwasher. I told myself not to poke around. I went back to the couch. Sleep came in thin strips. At 3, I woke again, cold, and tucked my feet under the throw pillow. At 4:30, the ice maker clunked, and I sat up fast, thinking someone had come in. I laughed at myself. The sun pressed a pale line under the blinds by 5:30. I gave up and made coffee. When the kids patted in with bed hair, I had pancakes going. Nora handed me a seashell she brought from home, a chipped little fan. For luck, she said. I kissed her forehead and thanked her. Charles came in and kissed the top of my head like I was a child. Judith wandered in last, wearing the resort robe from the master closet. She stretched, poured coffee, and said, "We'll take the master again tonight." The kids slept so well. I looked at the robe belt looped around her waist. I looked at my folded blanket on the couch. I said nothing. I flicked a pancake. If you're wondering why I didn't speak up, I'll tell you. I wanted to see who my son had become when I wasn't holding the map. When you pay for the roof, you learn quickly who respects the house. People show you the truth when they think you won't challenge them. And I was listening now. At noon, we carried chairs to the beach. I watched Judith pose for photos and tilt her chin like a small queen. Charles dug a hole with Ben and said he needed this break. I turned my face to the sun and decided something simple. I would be kind, but I would not be a doormat. I would not beg for a bed in a house I paid for. If they wanted to treat me like an option, they would learn that I also had options. That night, I folded the sheet again, laid it on the couch, and smoothed the wrinkle with my palm. I wasn't crying anymore. I was counting. Numbers have always been steady friends. Nights, dates, clauses, policies. People miss the fine print when they think they own you. The first night, let her sleep on the couch. That was the start. But it wasn't the story. The story was what I did with those words, and how by the end of the week, my son and his wife learned to read every line. I didn't sleep. I lay there on the couch with the thin sheet over my legs, listening to the house settle. Pipes ticked. The fan hummed. Every sound called up a memory I didn't ask for. I watched the dark and thought about the years that shaped me into someone who still believed in family even when it hurt. When Charles was a baby, money was tight. Ray worked at the warehouse. I took extra hours at the supply company whenever they asked. I kept a spiral notebook of every bill in pencil because it let me erase and start again when the numbers didn't meet. On Fridays, I bought one treat, a small bag of coffee beans from the good grocery, and I made them last. On Sundays, I cooked enough for 3 days, so we didn't eat out. That was our rhythm. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I thought about the winter Charles broke his wrist on the playground. I left work early and drove him to urgent care in a snowstorm. We ate saltine crackers from the vending machine and laughed at the little cup of ice chips they handed him like a prize. On the way home, he fell asleep with his head against the seatbelt, and I cried a little because I was scared and proud at the same time. That's motherhood. You do the hard thing, and then you do the next thing. I stared at the ceiling and counted backward to another night, his high school graduation. Ray, and I sat on metal bleachers. When they called Charles's name, I clapped so hard my hands stung. Ray whispered, "That's our boy." We took a photo with the old digital camera. The picture is crooked, and I love it. I paid for his class ring with 4 months of small payments. He didn't wear it long, but that's not the point. The point was that he had it, and he knew he mattered. Upstairs, I heard laughter. Judith's voice rose and fell, smooth as glass. A TV played something. A door closed. A drawer slid. I wiped my face with the corner of the sheet and told myself to grow up. At 67, you'd think I'd be past tears. But age doesn't dry your eyes. It only makes you hide the tissue faster. I thought about the first time Charles brought Judith home. She was polite enough. Nice coat. Clean nails. I tried to make conversation about where she grew up and what she liked to cook. She looked at her phone a lot. Later, after they left, Ray said, "She's young. Give her time." So I did. I gave her time, and birthdays and holidays and the good plates. I gave her a pair of earrings on her first Mother's Day because I didn't want her to feel alone. I wanted to fold her into us. But some people don't fold. They sit on top and ask for more napkins. The couch cushion had a ridge down the middle. My hip found it every time I moved. I got up and tucked a towel under it to make it better. I lay back down and put my hand over my heart because the beat felt fast, and I hate that feeling. I breathed slow, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Something I learned when Ray was sick. Slow is free. I thought about how Judith talks to me. Short sentences. No questions. We'll take care of the big stuff. You don't need to worry about that. We've got it. It sounds kind, but it pushes you to the edge of the room. You become extra. A helper for the kids. An errand runner. A wallet with legs. It happens one small moment at a time until you look up and realize nobody sees you standing there. You funded the roof, and somehow you're still in the rain. The kids were asleep. That helped. I can take a lot if Ben and Nora are okay. I thought about how Ben lines up his toy cars in perfect rows, and how Nora still slips her hand into mine when we cross a street. I would never hurt them. That's important to me. They didn't make the choices. The adults did. I remembered the day Ray, and I paid off the house. We made spaghetti and ate on the porch with the dog at our feet. We didn't take a trip or buy a new couch. We breathed and slept hard and woke up with peace. When Ray died, I promised I would use our savings wisely. I promised I would still do good things with it. That's why I picked this rental. I wanted to buy a memory that felt like the porch did that night. I didn't buy it for a cold couch. A car rolled past outside. Headlights brushed the blinds. I shifted, and the towel slid. My hip found the ridge again. I sat up and rubbed the joint like that would fix it. I'm not fragile, but I'm not made of rubber either. The couch was a statement as much as a bed. It said, "You're not part of the plan." Down the hall, the under-cabinet light still glowed in the kitchen. I could see the corner of a paper on the island. Someone had been looking at the rental agreement earlier because it wasn't where I left it. I decided I'd look again in the morning with fresh eyes. I didn't want to rattle around the kitchen and start something at 2 in the morning. I've learned timing matters. A mother can win a fight and still lose the family if she picks the wrong minute. I wiped my cheeks again and got mad at myself for doing it. I don't like pity, even from me. I would rather stand up on a sore hip than lie down with a sore heart. I told myself a plain truth. They wouldn't have put me on this couch if they respected me. That stung. I said it again in my head, not to punish myself, but to stop pretending. Pretending is heavy. Honesty is lighter, even when it hurts. A memory came from nowhere. The church rummage sale when Charles was 8. He wanted a baseball glove that cost $5. I didn't have cash. I told him we'd come back after I got paid. The woman running the table saw his face and handed it to him. "Pay me when your mom can," she said. I found her the next Sunday and gave her 5 ones and a slice of pound cake. She laughed and hugged me. People who give you grace make you want to keep giving. People who take your seat make you want to stand up straighter. I made a decision in that quiet room that felt as firm as anything I've done. I decided to keep my mouth shut for now. Not forever, but now. I wanted to see whether the people I love would see me without a speech. Would my son look past his routine and notice me on the couch he walked past to the porch? Would his wife hear the way she sounded when she assigned rooms in a house she didn't pay for? Would anyone ask, "Mom, where do you want to sleep?" Silence can be a tool, not for pouting, for listening, for watching. When you raise a boy into a man, you learn his tells. Charles rubs his eyebrow when he's worried. He stares at his phone when he wants to avoid a hard talk. He says it's fine when it isn't. Judith straightens anything she thinks she owns. Pillows, plans, people. I lay there and watched them in my mind like a show I knew by heart. The clock on the stove clicked over to 2 o'clock, then 3 o'clock. I dozed and woke and dozed again. Every time I opened my eyes, I felt the same steady thought. I paid for this place. That fact didn't make me shout. It made me clear. If I pay, then I choose what dignity looks like for me. I don't need anyone's permission to be comfortable. By 4:30, I had decided 2 things. First, I wouldn't beg for a bed. Second, I would read every line of the agreement I signed with my own name. Not out of anger, out of respect for myself. I'm not a lawyer, but I can read. I kept a household afloat with a pencil and a calculator. I can manage a rental contract on a beach week. The first bird started up outside just after 5. The sky shifted. I sat up, folded the sheet, and smoothed the fabric as if it mattered. It did, in its small way. I made coffee and measured it the way I like. I set out bowls for cereal and put a plate of cut fruit in the fridge for later. I moved slowly with purpose. I wasn't sulking. I was getting ready. When I heard footsteps on the stairs, I wiped the counter and put my rental papers in a neat stack. I had kept my silence. The wound was there, but it had a shape now. I would not show it to people who couldn't handle it. I would show it to the page. And when the time was right, I would show it to the person who needed to see it most. The second night came, and the couch felt even harder than the first. I shifted from side to side until I gave up. Around midnight, I slipped into the kitchen for water. The under-cabinet light was on again, the same faint glow as the night before. Only this time, something caught my eye. A stack of papers sat out on the counter, not tucked neatly away, but spread like someone had been going over them. I pulled my glass from the shelf, poured water, and then looked closer. The heading on the first page read, Vacation Rental Agreement. My own name was typed near the top. The payment section listed my credit card number. The last 4 digits I knew by heart. My hand went still on the counter. The details came into focus one line at a time. Check-in date, check-out date. occupancy, refund policy. But what stopped me cold was the length of the booking. Not 7 days, like I thought. Not 1 week of family time. The reservation was for 30 nights, a full month. I put the glass down, so hard it clicked against the counter. I went back to the top and read again, thinking maybe my tired eyes were wrong. But there it was, checkout date a month later. My stomach tightened. I remembered the phone call months ago when I offered to treat everyone to this vacation. I told Charles, "Pick a week that works, I'll handle the rest." He said, "Thanks, Mom. That'll be nice." Nice. That was all. I never said anything about a month. I never would have. Who would pay for that? Yet here it was in black and white with my name attached to the bill. I shuffled through the pages. Additional notes had been typed in by email. Special requests. Judith's handwriting in pen marked across one margin. After week 1, ask about extra towels. Friends coming. My chest burned. Friends? So they planned to move me out after a week and invite their friends to live in the house I had paid for. I stood there gripping the paper until my hand shook. All those years of saving, all the times I pinched pennies, and they were treating my money like it fell out of the sky. It wasn't just about a couch anymore. It was about being used. I thought about Ray again. He would have been furious. He used to say, "Money's not the point, Jerry. Respect is the point." And that's exactly what was missing here. I turned the page to the payment schedule. A lump sum, already charged, no installments. My credit card was listed in bold letters. I had seen the receipt weeks ago, but I didn't notice the dates then. I just trusted. That was my mistake. I opened my purse under the counter and pulled out the printed email confirmation I brought from home. I unfolded it and compared the dates. The one I had printed said 1 week, but the agreement on the counter said 1 month. Somewhere along the line, someone had changed the reservation and used my card to cover it. The water in my glass went warm. I set it down untouched. I thought back to the moment Judith said, "Let her sleep on the couch." I thought it was just carelessness, a sign of disrespect. But now I saw it was something bigger. I wasn't just being shoved onto a sofa. I was being written out of the plan entirely. I pictured them after I left. Judith's friends lounging on the porch. Charles grilling out front. The kids running in the yard. My money covering the bills while I sat back home alone. The image made my throat tighten. I flipped to the back of the agreement, where the policies were printed in small type. That's when I saw the words that would later matter more than anything: 72-hour cancellation window. Full refund if canceled within 3 days of check-in. I glanced at the wall clock. This was day 2. Time was ticking, but the option was still open. I folded the papers carefully and slid them back into the stack the way I found them. I didn't want anyone to know I had read them. Not yet. I walked back to the couch and pulled the sheet over my lap. Sleep didn't come. Instead, thoughts poured in one after another. I thought about the sacrifices, the overtime hours, the years when Ray and I skipped vacations so we could build a savings account, the birthday parties I hosted in my small kitchen, stretching cake mixes and serving homemade lemonade. All of it was about family. I gave so much without ever asking much back. Now my own son and his wife had decided I was disposable. Judith treated me like a burden, not a partner, not even a guest. A burden, the kind of person you move to the couch, shuffle out the door, and replace with your friends when the timing fits. I clenched the blanket until my knuckles ached. The laughter upstairs from earlier echoed in my head. How they were probably planning the weeks ahead without me. How Charles had gone along with it all. That was the sharpest cut. My boy, who I raised with everything I had, standing silent while his wife treated me like I didn't belong. I lay awake until the first light touched the blinds. I knew now that silence wasn't weakness. Silence gave me time. And with time, I could choose carefully how to respond. They thought they had the upper hand, but they hadn't read the fine print as closely as I just had. That stack of papers on the counter didn't just tell me their plan. It told me my way out. The next morning, after the kids had eaten their cereal and run off to the porch, I slipped into the corner chair with my phone. I pulled up my email. I had kept every message from the rental company, and I wanted to see the truth for myself. The confirmation email I printed at home months ago said 7 nights. Clear as day. Check in on Saturday. Check out the following Saturday. But when I logged into the account and opened the latest receipt, my stomach turned. The booking now showed 30 nights. The balance matched exactly what was on my credit card. The line item spelled it out. Paid in full. There was no mistake. It was deliberate. I scrolled further and found a change notice tucked between junk emails. Dated 2 weeks after I first made the reservation. Extension confirmed. I hadn't approved it, yet my card had been charged. And right at the bottom, billing contact, Geraldine Hill. My name again, but not my decision. I sat very still, my thumb resting on the edge of the screen. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The numbers didn't lie. They never do. My son and his wife had quietly stretched the vacation behind my back, counting on me not to notice. I glanced toward the porch where Judith was adjusting her sunglasses and laughing at something Charles said. She looked so at home, legs crossed, drink in her hand. She reminded me of someone who'd walked into a store and picked out a new coat without once asking the price. Why should she? Someone else was paying. Charles was worse in a way. He leaned back in the chair beside her, nodding, smiling, saying nothing. That silence of his cut me deeper than her words. A son who watched his mother sleep on a couch while his wife took the master. A son who let my money cover weeks I hadn't agreed to. That silence felt heavier than any argument. I thought about all the times I'd open my wallet for him. College tuition scraped together from savings bonds and tax returns. His first used car, I co-signed so he'd have a chance at building credit. Even when he and Judith were newly married and short on rent, I slipped them money for groceries without telling Ray. I did it because that's what mothers do. You give until you're empty, and then you keep giving. And now here I was, a widow on a couch in a house I paid for, discovering that my son had stood by while his wife used my card like it was her own. The betrayal was quiet but sharp, not the kind that comes with yelling, but the kind that makes you stop breathing for a second. I folded the phone case shut and set it on my lap. I didn't cry this time. I'd already done that the night before. Instead, I stared at the wooden floor and let the truth settle in. Judith had always been clever. She dressed sharp, spoke like she knew best, and moved people around like puzzle pieces. I used to excuse it, telling myself she was young, she'd learn. But now I saw it plain. She wasn't careless. She was deliberate. She knew how to make herself comfortable and how to make me small. And Charles, I couldn't stop thinking about his silence. It was as if the boy I raised, the boy who once brought me a wilted flower from the yard just to see me smile, was gone. This man beside Judith wasn't that boy. He was someone who chose peace with his wife over respect for his mother. I thought of Ray again. He would have shaken his head and said, "Jerry, people show you who they are. Believe them the first time." And that's what I had in front of me, the truth of who they had become when they thought I wasn't looking. But I didn't speak up. Not then. I didn't storm onto the porch or wave the email in their faces. That's not my way. I've learned that when people underestimate you, silence is power. I folded my hands, fixed my face, and walked out to join them with a smile. "Coffee's good this morning," I said. Judith nodded without looking up from her phone. Charles handed me a chair. That was all. No thanks for the house. No question about my sleep. Just business as usual. I sat there, sipping, while my mind turned over the facts like stones in my pocket. A 30-night booking. My card charged. Their plan to enjoy the place after I left. My sacrifice turned into their playground. It was then I knew I couldn't trust words anymore. Not theirs, not even mine. I needed action. Careful, quiet action. Something they wouldn't see coming. So I decided I would wait. I would watch. I would plan. Not with anger, but with clarity. They thought I was weak because I didn't protest. They thought they had control because they'd written me onto the couch. But they hadn't counted on one thing, that I could read just as well as they could. I picked up my coffee cup, smiled at the kids running in the yard, and let the plan begin forming in my head. That evening, when everyone had gone to bed and the house settled into its usual creaks and hums, I pulled the rental papers out again. I sat at the kitchen table with just the small light above the stove. I read every line, slow and careful, like I used to go over invoices at work. The words were plain enough. Cancellation policy. Guest may cancel within 72 hours of check-in for a full refund. My heart picked up. I counted on my fingers. Check-in was Saturday. Tonight was Monday. That meant I had one night left inside the window. I was still in control, though they had no idea. I set the papers down and opened my laptop. My hands shook a little as I typed in the reservation number. The screen loaded slow, like it was testing my nerve. When the booking popped up, there it was again. 30 nights, fully paid, my name as guarantor. I stared at the total. It was more than I ever thought I'd spend on one trip in my whole life. I hovered over the cancel button. I thought of Charles upstairs, asleep beside Judith in the master bedroom I wasn't allowed to touch. I thought of the kids tucked in, unaware of the grown-up games being played around them. I thought of myself curled on a couch with a blanket that barely reached my feet. I pressed the button. The confirmation came fast. Reservation canceled. Refund issued. Just like that, their month-long scheme dissolved. The balance would return to my card within days. I leaned back in the chair and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For the first time in 2 nights, I felt something lift off my chest. They thought they had me cornered, but they had overlooked the fine print. They hadn't counted on the woman who paid attention to details for a living. I could have stopped there. I could have gone online and booked a small 1-bedroom unit somewhere close. That would have been the safe choice. That would have been fair. But as I scrolled through the listings, one photo caught my eye. An oceanfront villa, the resort's most expensive option. Wide windows facing the water, a private balcony, a soft king bed dressed in white. It was more than I had ever allowed myself. I stared at the picture for a long time. Part of me said, "Don't do it. Be modest. Keep the peace." But another part, the part that had slept on a couch in a house she paid for, said, "No. They put you on the couch like you were nothing. Show them what dignity looks like." I clicked on the villa. The price made me blink. But then I reminded myself this wasn't their money. It was mine. Every dollar had been earned honestly. Every dollar had been stretched and saved. If I wanted to spend some of it on myself, I had every right. I booked it. Presidential suite. 5 nights. My name only. Paid in full, with the refund they had tried to bury under their plan. As soon as the confirmation hit my inbox, I felt a calmness I hadn't felt in days. Not giddy, not smug, just steady. For once, I wasn't begging for a place at the table. I was choosing my own seat. I closed the laptop and folded the rental papers back into a neat stack. I didn't tell anyone. Not Charles, not Judith. They would wake up tomorrow thinking the week was theirs. They would make beach plans, cook breakfast, carry on as if everything belonged to them. And then, soon enough, they would learn. I carried my blanket back to the couch and lay down, this time with a small smile. It wasn't about revenge in the fiery sense. It was about balance, about showing people that kindness isn't weakness, and silence doesn't mean surrender. They left me on the couch. I whispered to myself. But I chose the villa. The waves outside carried on, steady and endless. I pulled the blanket up, closed my eyes, and thought of the view I would wake up to soon. A wide ocean, a bed that was mine, and the peace of knowing I had finally drawn my own line. And I slept, not deeply, but enough, because I knew I had turned the tables without saying a single word. The next morning, I woke before anyone else. The house was still, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stretched my back, folded the sheet, and tucked it neatly at the end of the couch. The night before, I had clicked the button that changed everything, but no one in the house knew it yet. That secret sat with me like a stone in my pocket, heavy but comforting. I went straight to the kitchen. I cracked eggs, whisked them, and set bacon strips on the griddle. The smell filled the house. By the time the kids padded in, rubbing their eyes, the table was already set with plates and juice cups. "Grandma, pancakes too?" Nora asked. "Of course," I said. "What's breakfast without pancakes?" Her smile lit up the room. Ben climbed onto a chair and asked if we could go hunting for seashells after we ate. I nodded, even though I knew my plans went deeper than beach walks. Judith came in next, hair pinned up, robe tied tight. She poured herself coffee, without a word, and leaned against the counter. Then, as if she owned the house, she said, "The master bed was wonderful. We slept so well." She said it like a little jab, as if to remind me where I spent my night. I only smiled and flipped a pancake. "I'm glad you're comfortable." She didn't catch the tone. She just sipped her coffee and scrolled on her phone. Charles followed a few minutes later. He kissed my cheek lightly. "Morning, Mom. Smells good in here." I set a plate in front of him. "Eat while it's hot." He sat, fork in hand, already talking about the day. "I was thinking we'll hit the beach by mid-morning, then check out that seafood place for dinner. Judith's parents might drive down tomorrow too, so we'll need to stock up on groceries." I nodded as if it was all fine. Inside, though, the words turned over like sharp stones. He was planning tomorrow as if tomorrow was guaranteed. He had no idea that the very ground under him was about to shift. Judith added her own list. We should get a cooler for drinks. And extra towels, especially if friends come later in the week. I swallowed my bite of pancake slowly. Friends. She said it openly now. No shame. No hesitation. She was already looking past me, past my week, to the month she thought belonged to her. I kept my eyes soft, my voice calm. That sounds like a lot of fun. They didn't notice anything different in me. That was the gift of age. When you're older, people think you're harmless. They forget you've lived long enough to know how to keep your face steady, while your mind works 100 steps ahead. The kids laughed as syrup dripped onto the table. Charles told me again how much he needed this break. Judith started talking about which nights they should invite friends over for barbecues. I smiled, wiped little Nora's chin, and poured more juice. But inside, my thoughts were clear as glass. Tomorrow, you'll see the cost of your choices. Tomorrow, the same contract you ignored will open your eyes. And tomorrow, when the manager walks in, I won't have to say a word. The papers will speak for me. After breakfast, we walked down to the beach. I carried a chair, an umbrella, letting Charles think he was helping me when he grabbed them halfway. Judith stretched on a towel, while the kids ran toward the water. I sat with my toes in the sand, watching the waves roll in. I thought about Ray again, how he used to say the ocean never lies. It gives what it gives, steady, without caring who stands at the edge. Charles leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. This was a great idea, Mom. I turned to look at him. He meant it, but he didn't realize what he had allowed. He thought I would just keep saying yes, keep carrying the weight, quietly. He thought I would let it slide, that I was treated as a guest in my own gift. I only smiled. I'm glad you're enjoying it. That evening, Judith cooked pasta, and I washed the dishes after. She didn't thank me. Charles played cards with the kids, and I laughed along. I let them believe I was content. I let them see the grandmother who served and stayed in the background. But when the house went quiet again and the lights dimmed, I carried my blanket to the couch one last time. I lay down and whispered to myself, enjoy it while you can. Tomorrow, you'll learn what it feels like to be on the outside looking in. I closed my eyes with a small smile, not from cruelty, but from certainty. They thought they had won. They didn't know I had already moved the board. The morning started like any other. The kids were already bouncing around, swimsuits on, talking about building a sandcastle bigger than yesterday's. I brewed the coffee, set out fruit, and kept my face calm. Judith was fussing with her hair in the mirror near the porch, and Charles was packing a beach bag. Not long after breakfast, Judith's parents pulled into the driveway. They lived only a couple of hours away and had decided to spend the day with us. Her mother, Edith, walked in with a covered dish and kissed the children, while her father, Tom, carried in folding chairs. They were cheerful, ready for a sunny beach day. Judith beamed, introducing them around like she was queen of the house. The kids were thrilled. Grandma Edith, we're going to the beach. You can come with us. Nora squealed, clapping her hands. Judith smiled and said, see, this house is perfect for family. We'll have room for everyone. I just poured myself another cup of coffee and sat in the corner chair. Perfect for family, she said, as if I wasn't still on the couch. They were busy making plans, packing towels, slathering sunscreen on the kids. The air was buzzing with the kind of excitement you only see at the start of a beach day. Judith's voice rose above it all, giving instructions about who should carry what. Then came the knock. It wasn't light or friendly. It was firm, sharp, 3 times in a row. Everyone went still for a second. Charles looked toward the door, frowning. Judith's father set down a chair. The kids froze mid-step, sand buckets in their hands. Charles opened the door. Standing there was the property manager in a polo shirt with the resort logo, a clipboard under his arm. Beside him were 2 uniformed security staff. The sight of them filled the doorway like a wall. Mr. Hill, the manager asked. Yes, Charles said, his voice uncertain. The manager adjusted his clipboard. This reservation was canceled last night. I'm here to inform you and your party that you need to vacate the property within the hour. The words landed like stones on tile. Silence filled the room for a beat, then broke. Judith rushed forward, her face flushed. What do you mean canceled? That's impossible. We're staying here for the month. The manager didn't flinch. He held up the paperwork. The system shows the booking was canceled, refund processed, and the property is no longer reserved under your name. I'm required to enforce the policy. Charles's face drained of color. There has to be a mistake, he said quickly. Check again. We didn't cancel anything. Judith's voice rose louder. We have children here. My parents just arrived. You can't just throw us out. The kids looked back and forth, eyes wide, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Nora clutched her bucket tighter, while Ben whispered, What's happening, Dad? Edith stepped in, her voice sharp. Surely there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter and son-in-law have this house for the month. The manager shook his head firmly. The system is correct. Cancelled. I'm sorry, but the rules are the same for everyone. You have 1 hour to clear out. Security will assist if needed. Judith exploded. This is outrageous. Do you know how much money this costs? Do you understand who we are? The manager didn't argue. He only repeated, 1 hour. Charles turned to Judith, panic written across his face. Judith, what did you do? Did you mess with the booking? She snapped back. Don't you dare put this on me. I didn't cancel anything. Why would I? We invited friends. My parents are here. The kids tugged at Charles's arm. Dad, are we still going to the beach? Ben asked softly. Charles didn't answer. He rubbed his forehead, his old nervous habit, and looked completely lost. I sat quietly in the corner chair, sipping my coffee. The steam rose in front of my face, hiding the smile that almost slipped out. The moment I had been waiting for was unfolding exactly as I knew it would. They scrambled. Judith shouted at the manager. Edith fussed over her daughter. Tom asked questions no one could answer. And Charles just kept pacing. The kids stood by the door, clutching their sand buckets, confused by the adults' chaos. The house that had been full of plans just minutes earlier now buzzed with panic. And all I had to do was sit and wait. I let them argue and panic until the room was full of noise. Judith waving her arms, Charles pacing, Edith pleading with the manager, Tom trying to make sense of it, the children staring wide-eyed. All of them in a storm of their own making. That was the moment I decided it was time. I set my coffee cup gently on the side table and stood. My suitcase was already packed and waiting by the door. I had done that before sunrise, while the rest of them slept soundly in their beds. The only sound in the house then had been the zipper closing across my bag. Now, with the property manager watching and the 2 security officers at his side, I walked forward slowly. Calm. No rush, no raised voice. I lifted my suitcase handle, rolled it across the wood floor, and stopped beside Charles. Every eye turned to me. I looked at Charles, then at Judith, and finally let my gaze settle on her parents. My voice was steady, clear enough that every person in the room could hear. You said I should sleep on the couch. I decided I'd rather have my own room. Silence fell heavy, thicker than the air after a storm. Judith's mouth opened, but no words came. Charles blinked like he hadn't understood. Edith gasped softly and clutched her husband's arm. The children shifted their weight, sensing something big had just been revealed, even if they didn't know what it meant. Before anyone could respond, the property manager cleared his throat and spoke again. Mrs. Hill, your presidential suite is ready. Shall I send a golf cart to take you and your luggage? The effect was immediate. Judith's face drained of color. Charles's shoulders sagged. Tom looked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. And Edith's eyes widened in shock as she realized exactly what had happened. Gasps filled the room. Charles was the first to break the silence. His voice cracked. Mom, what did you do? I turned to him, my tone even. I simply read the policy. Something you should have done before you agreed to your wife's plan. The house was under my name, my card, and when I saw what you intended, I chose to protect myself. Judith's voice snapped sharp. Her anger barely held together. You canceled our trip. You upgraded yourself while leaving your own grandchildren without a place to stay. I didn't flinch. Judith, I gave my son and his family a gift. A week together in a beautiful home. I didn't agree to pay for a month so you could host friends after I left. And I certainly didn't agree to be treated like an afterthought in the house I paid for. Charles looked at the manager, desperate. Can't you fix this? Can't you reverse it? The manager shook his head. No, sir. The reservation was canceled properly, refund processed. The property is no longer yours. We're required to enforce policy equally. The neighbors across the street had stepped onto their porch, curious at the sight of security standing in the doorway. A few passers-by slowed down to watch. The humiliation stretched wide, far beyond these walls. Judith's parents stood frozen, caught between defending their daughter and recognizing the truth. Tom finally spoke, his voice low. "She outsmarted you, Judith. She paid for this place. She had every right." Judith spun toward him, her face red. "Dad, you can't be serious. We're being thrown out like criminals." I turned to Edith and Tom, my voice steady but firm. "I'm sorry for the embarrassment, but sometimes a line has to be drawn. And today, I decided to draw mine." Charles's voice wavered again. "Mom, you didn't have to do this. You could have talked to me." I met his eyes. "I did talk to you, Charles, not with words, but with my presence. I've been silent every time you let her dismiss me, every time you looked away, when she treated me like I didn't belong. Silence was my warning. You chose not to hear it." Judith crossed her arms, glaring. "This is cruel. You've humiliated your own family." I shook my head. "No, Judith, I didn't humiliate anyone. You did that yourselves when you took advantage of me. I simply let the truth catch up with you." The property manager motioned toward the security officers. "Mrs. Hill, we'll escort you to your suite whenever you're ready. As for the rest of you, you have 40 minutes remaining to vacate." The children looked at me, confused, clutching their buckets and toys. My heart softened for them, but I reminded myself they weren't the ones who made these choices. Their parents did. I bent down, touched Nora's hand gently, and said, "Grandma will still see you. Don't worry. This isn't your fault." Judith huffed loudly, muttering under her breath, but said nothing more. I straightened my back, lifted my suitcase, and gave a small nod to the manager. "Yes, please. Send the cart." The officers stepped aside to make a path for me. As I rolled my suitcase past, the room remained heavy with silence. Charles looked broken. Judith looked furious. Her parents looked ashamed. And me, I walked out into the sunlight, calm, steady, carrying nothing but my suitcase and the knowledge that for once I had chosen myself. The moment I stepped outside, the sun felt brighter than it had all week. The golf cart pulled up quietly, waiting for me, while behind me the chaos grew louder. I didn't rush. I placed my suitcase on the cart and sat down gently. From where I was, I could still hear them inside. Charles's voice rose first. "Judith, stop yelling. We need to start packing before they throw us out." But Judith's reply came sharp, cutting. "This is your fault, Charles. You let her control everything. You never stand up for us. And now look, your mother humiliated us in front of everyone." I could almost see him running his hand over his forehead, the way he always did when cornered. The children's voices came next, softer, confused. "Dad, are we really leaving? Where are we going?" Ben asked. His words hit the air heavy, with no answer following fast enough. Nora's voice carried, fragile. "But Grandma said she'd see us. Why can't we stay too?" Judith snapped. "Not now, Nora. Go pack your things." The security staff shifted near the door, polite but firm, waiting for them to move. The property manager repeated calmly, 40 minutes remain." Inside, drawers slammed, zippers dragged across bags, and voices tangled. I heard Judith muttering angrily, Edith sighing heavily, and Tom trying to corral the children. The sound of their once cheerful planning turned to the thud of defeat. I sat on the cart, hands folded in my lap, not gloating, not smiling, just steady. This wasn't about watching them fall apart. It was about reclaiming the piece of dignity they had stripped from me when they sent me to the couch. Charles stumbled out first, carrying a bag, awkwardly. his shirt clinging to him with sweat. He glanced at me, but his eyes couldn't hold mine for long. He set the bag down roughly near their car. Judith followed, arms full of clothes still on hangers, shouting instructions back at her parents. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We had plans for the whole month. Do you know how much work I put into this?" Charles muttered back, "Work? You didn't pay for any of this, Judith." "She did." That made her stop cold. She turned to him, face red, and hissed, "So you're taking her side now? After what she just did to us?" He didn't answer. He just lifted another bag and shoved it into the trunk. The kids came out last, dragging their little backpacks, heads lowered. Ben held onto his bucket as if it were the only thing he could control. Nora clutched a stuffed bear to her chest. I caught Nora's and gave her the smallest smile. She looked at me as though she wanted to run over, but Judith's sharp voice called her back. The cart driver asked softly, "Ready, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, nodding. As the cart began to pull away, I glanced back one last time. They were scattered across the driveway, fumbling with bags, snapping at each other, faces twisted with frustration. The same family that had strutted into that rental full of confidence now stood exposed, struggling in front of neighbors and strangers. Judith's parents tried to soothe her, but their own embarrassment was clear. Edith's eyes never lifted from the ground. Tom rubbed his neck, avoiding everyone's gaze. They had walked in proud, expecting a day at the beach, and were now leaving with suitcases in hand, reputation dented. Charles called out once more, his voice weaker than before. "Mom, please, can we talk later?" I didn't answer, not because I was cruel, but because some lessons are better left to settle in silence. He had chosen his side when he let Judith speak for both of them. Now, the consequences were theirs to carry. The golf cart turned the corner, and the house disappeared behind me. Ahead, the path opened to the oceanfront villas. The air felt different there, lighter, cleaner, untouched by their noise. When we reached the entrance, a staff member opened the door to the presidential suite with a warm smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Hill." I stepped inside, the sound of the waves filling the wide glass windows. The bed was dressed in white linens, the balcony stretched out toward the horizon. Everything was calm, untouched, and mine. As I set my suitcase down, I thought of the contrast. Back at the rental, they were cramming bags into a car, voices sharp and angry, children confused. Here, I had peace, space, and the dignity of knowing I had drawn my own line. It wasn't about punishing them. It was about showing them, once and for all, that generosity should never be mistaken for weakness. I poured myself a glass of water, stepped onto the balcony, and watched the ocean roll steady against the shore. Behind me, they packed out in shame. Ahead of me, I had 5 nights of peace that I had earned. The presidential suite was more than just a room, it was freedom. When I walked across the wide living area that first evening, I could hear nothing but the ocean outside. No arguing voices. No footsteps above me. No reminder that I was expected to take the smallest corner. Just silence, steady and kind. I slid open the balcony door and stepped out into the salt air. The waves rolled in endlessly, brushing against the shore with the same rhythm they had carried all my life. The sunset painted the water orange and gold. For the first time in days, maybe even years, I felt completely at peace. I unpacked slowly, hanging my clothes in the closet that was mine alone. I set my little toiletries on the bathroom counter, lined up neatly, without anyone sighing that I took too much space. The king-size bed stood tall and clean, the sheets tucked tight. That night, when I slipped beneath them, I stretched out my arms wide and laughed softly to myself. No couch, no draft, no ache in my back. Just comfort I had bought with my own hand. The next morning, I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee. The sea breeze carried through my hair, and I thought about the week that had brought me here. I thought about Charles's silence, Judith's arrogance, and my grandchildren's confused faces. The whole thing played back in my mind like a story I still couldn't believe I had lived. Sometimes revenge is loud. People picture shouting matches, slammed doors, cutting words. But I had learned something different. Sometimes revenge is quiet. Sometimes it's letting people walk themselves into their own downfall. Sometimes it's simply stepping aside and letting consequences arrive. I hadn't needed to raise my voice, hadn't needed to insult or accuse. All I did was read the contract they ignored, press a button they never thought I'd find, and choose my own worth over their greed. And the truth came crashing down on them, right where they stood. Still, as I sipped my coffee, I let myself wrestle with the question. Was I too harsh? Should I have thought more about the children, about the shock on their little faces when the manager said we had to leave? Was it fair to let them carry that confusion, even though they weren't the ones who lied or schemed? Or was this just as long overdue? Was it finally time for Charles and Judith to understand that taking advantage of someone, even family, has a cost? That treating a mother, a grandmother, like an afterthought in the house she paid for wasn't just disrespect. It was cruelty? I don't have all the answers. I only know how it felt, lying on that couch while the people I loved the most let me shrink into nothing. And I know how it felt stepping into this suite, opening the curtains and saying to myself, "You belong here. You deserve this." Life teaches you hard lessons as you age. One of the hardest is realizing that family doesn't always mean respect. Sometimes you have to demand it, not by yelling, not by fighting, but by choosing yourself when no one else will. I looked out at the ocean again, waves stretching farther than my eyes could see. Their trip had ended in shame. Mine had begun anew, full of dignity, and I felt lighter, freer, and maybe even a little proud. But I want to ask you, what do you think? Was I right to cancel everything and step into the suite, or was I wrong to go that far? Should I have swallowed my pride and stayed silent for the sake of the children, or was it finally my turn to stand tall? What would you have done in my place? I want to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments, because I know some of you will say I gave them exactly what they deserved, and others will say I should have shown more mercy. And maybe that debate is the lesson itself. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories. Because sometimes the biggest lessons in life come not from books or sermons, but from the choices we make when love and respect are tested. Lastly, don't forget to download this wonderful book called 38 Uplifting and Funny Short Stories for Seniors. Easy-to-read tales that bring laughter, memories, and mental stimulation. It's full of heartwarming, simple stories written to bring a smile, stir up memories, and remind us that joy doesn't fade with age. It grows stronger. You'll find it in the pinned comment below.